we've been talking a lot about the quads. In fact, this is our second week talking about quads. Start off with the anatomy of the quads. As the name of the muscle suggests, there's 4 heads of the quadriceps, right? And you can go back and look at lesson 1 to understand that, right? So you look, and if you're sitting down, you kind of see that it looks like you look at your knee, and on the inner side of the knee, it looks like a second knee almost. And that bump that comes out there, basically we talk about as being the vastus medialis. But that's like the inner head of the quad, the vastus medialis. You go on the outside, we have the outer sweep of the quad, right? Basically that outer sweeps kind of makes the waist look smaller if it's developed, right? And that's called the vastus lateralis. And then you have basically that inner quad that kind of separates, that really cool looking one where you do a pose and like, whoa, look at that pop right in the middle, that inner quad that you get super excited about. You know you're leaner when it's popping. That's the rectus femoris. And then you're like, well, where's the 4th quad? Like they call it the quad, I only see 3. Underneath the quads, right in the middle, is the vastus intermedialis, right? So, or vastus intermedius. That's right in the middle, underneath the other quads, the vastus intermedius. Now, here's the thing. When you look at the quadriceps, you want to understand, well, where are they connecting, where are they inserting, because that tells you what they do. So when you look at the outer quads, right, the outer quads, the inner quads, the vastus intermedialis, those 3 heads, they connect on the thigh bone, okay? They connect on the thigh bone. And the thigh bone is known as the femur, okay? But that muscle that splits the quads out, sorry guys, technical difficulties there. That muscle that splits the quads out, the rectus femoris, it crosses the hip joint. Like it actually connects onto the hip. What does that mean? You're not just moving at the knee, now you're actually moving at the hip, okay? So now the quadriceps have a number of different things they do. They all extend the knee, but that middle head of the quads also flexes the hip, okay? So, for example, if I was going to put my arms in the air and I were to raise my legs up and down, that's flexing at the hip, and I'd actually train that rectus femoris. And actually, like at one point in time, when I got down really lean and my quads were popping, I started to throw in a lot more like hanging leg raises, and that middle quad started to pop like a diamond. And so the point is, like, I started doing more hanging leg raises and stuff like that. It kept popping and popping and popping. So again, that middle quad, basically, it can do hip flexion, but also it's going to do leg extension. We'll talk about how all those things sort of connect in a second. So now what we're going to do is we'll talk about the muscle fiber makeup of the quads. Now this is very, very important because a lot of people are like, well, what repetition range should I train the quads at, right? What do I need to do, et cetera, et cetera. So let's think about this for a second here. One of the greatest squatters of all time, is they called him Dr. Squat. Dr. Squat. Can you imagine if you had a name like your nickname was Dr. Squat? Now, Dr. Squat he actually broke the world record for squatting at the time. I can't remember, it was a while back. I want to say it was probably back in 1990 or something like that. Basically, he broke the world record. It was like 1,014 pounds at the time, and he was 50 at the time. Anyone know I'm talking about Dr. Squat? Anyone know? His name is Fred Hatfield. Now, I had a chance actually one time to have dinner with Fred Hatfield, and I picked his brain. One of the most greatest minds ever. If you don't know Fred Hatfield, start reading his stuff. You know, one of the godfathers, really, of squatting. But anyway, why I bring this up? Epic battle between Fred Hatfield and Tom Platz. They had a squat off. You remember what I'm talking about?
All that.
Yes, they had a squat off. Okay, and of course, what are some nicknames for Tom Platz?
Quadzilla.
the quad father. So, I mean, that's freaking out. The quad father, Quadzilla. This guy did it all, right? So basically, they had a squat off. And at the time, Tom Platz, there's different people talk about different things, but at the time, Tom Platz was squatting like around 600 and something pounds. Say it was 650 pounds at the time, but unreal. But Dr. Squat could squat like at the time around 860 pounds. Okay, so Dr. Squat 860 pounds, Tom Platz around 650. They had a squat off. Dr. Squat beat Fred Hatfield in maximal squat. He ate 850. But Tom Platz was around 650. Then they went and they squatted 405. They squatted 405 pounds as many times as they could. Dr. Squat squatted 11 times. And Tom Platz squatted it like 23 times. 405 for 23 reps, right? So, but the main point about it is Dr. Squat, higher maximal squat. Tom Platz came in with a lower maximal squat but could out-squat Fred Hatfield with 23 reps on 405. Actually, I was wrong. Okay, sorry. No, that was 525. I stand corrected. 525 pounds. 525 pounds. The guy squatted it 23 times. What's my point? They call him the Quad Father and Quadzilla for a reason. And that's because he had a good maximal squat and great strength endurance, and Tom Platz was training all repetition ranges. Now, genetically, the muscle fiber makeup of the quads, it changes. It's different from person to person, okay? But what we see is typically at least 40% slow twitch, at least 40% fast twitch, and then your genetic variation is about 20%. So some people might have 60% fast twitch, some people might have 60% slow, but on average at least 40-40, and then it sways the other way. Now what's this mean? Basically it means that because there's a large mixture of muscle fiber makeup of the quads, it means that you essentially need to train them at all repetition ranges like Tom Platz. So Dr. Squat, when he trained, might do like 2 to 5 reps with 10 to 15 sets of 2 to 5 reps. Tom Platz, on the other hand, might do like 25, 30 sets, and his rep range would range anywhere from 5 reps all the way to 50 reps. And that's my point. My point is if you want to build the quads, okay, then you need to basically hit them at 5 reps up to 50 reps. Low reps all the way up to high reps. You've got to hit them at all repetition ranges. I'm going to take a quick pause. I got to answer this question from Eric Olson. He talks about Mike Hearn and Stan Efferding doing a squat off. I don't know if they're doing a squat off, but Eric, Mike O'Hearn is going to come to ASPI for his birthday when he turns 48, which is going to be this year. January. So it'll be January 2018. He's coming down here, and he's going to squat 315 for 48 reps. Back onto the lesson. So I was just talking to Mike the other day. So, okay, so that's that lesson on wishbone. Now what we're going to talk about is squat depth. Okay. So I was just talking basically I was just talking with William Wallace. If you don't know William Wallace, you should. He's like the smartest guy I've ever seen on biomechanics, like ever. William Wallace is like I had an analogy about William Wallace the other day. It was like Star Wars. And the reason why I started is I was talking to Kai Green about Star Wars, like in-depth conversation. But you know Anakin, right? He's like this amazing Jedi of right? Yeah. I feel like Will is like an Anakin of like biomechanics. Like he's that smart. But anyway, we were talking about mechanics and stuff like that. If you look at like the quads, the mechanical advantage for the quads peaks at about a quarter squat, okay? So what happens is when you do, a lot of guys, I go to the gym, how many times do you see people load up the bar? And when they load the bar, Paul can squat a lot of weight, okay? First time I saw Paul like squat, he loaded up a ton of weight. I was like, because Paul at the time he was around my size, now he's like 10 pounds heavier. But anyway, and going up, okay? By the time he loaded the bar, I was like, there's no way, right? goes down, squats to the floor. I'm like, this guy's legit. He's legit, okay? Hey. But my point is, most times that people load up the bar, they end up doing a quarter squat. Why? Because mechanical advantage peaks at around a quarter squat. So when you get more and you go greater depth, muscle activation on the quads is going to go up, okay? So my point is that you want to think of it that way, that you want to increase the depth on the squat, because that's going to mechanically, it's going to be more difficult on the quads, and so they're going to have to activate more muscle tissue to compensate. So greater depth on squats, hit the floor, right? I'm sure people are going to argue with me, blah, 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 but whatever. Now, going on that notion, when you're doing legs, if you have greater mechanical advantage near full extension, what can you do to compensate for that? Well, one thing you do is add bands. Because as you move upward, even though you have a greater mechanical advantage, the band tension's increasing. So basically, one of the studies we talked about, they did leg extensions. And when you did leg extensions, you put the band on there, you had greater muscle activation basically throughout the range of motion, and it was peaking near the top. So doing leg extensions is basically going to be very, very good if you add bands in general, okay? Okay. So next thing we talked about was front squats, and I'm actually, front squats versus back squats, but I'm going to tie in high bar squats as well, okay, with the front squat. So let's think about this for a second, okay? What happens is when you squat, you have the knees and you have the hips, okay, right? So mechanically, if the bar is farther away from say like this is the knee, okay? If the bar is farther away from if the bar is farther away from the knee, that means the knee is going to have to activate more muscle because the bar is farther away from me. So mechanically, it's going to activate more muscle. Okay. If I'm more upright, right, like on a front squat, I got to stay upright, which means when I'm squatting down, the bar is going to be further away from my knee. So my quads have to work harder. Similarly, if I have a high bar squat, I'm going to also have to stay somewhat upright because if I don't, the bar is going to roll forward and I'm going to fail, okay? So both on a front squat, typically you don't fail necessarily because of strength. You fail because basically the bar starts to roll forward and you're done. Same thing with like a high bar squat, essentially. If the bar starts to roll forward, I fail, okay? So I have to stay more upright, and when I stay more upright, the bar is going to be further away from the knee, and that means I'm going to actually have to activate more muscle. What happens if I do a low bar squat? I lower the bar down on my back on a low bar squat. Look at low bar squatters. Low bar squatters have more forward lean. That puts the bar closer to the knee. There's less activation on the knee, but when you're leaning forward, what happens? Now the bar is further away from the hips. So that means that the hips, meaning that the glutes, the hamstrings, are going to have to engage and fire more with a lower bar squat. So the point is you're just changing leverage. If I have a high bar squat or a front bar squat, I stay upright, that forces the quads to have to work more. If I do a low bar squat, I typically lean more forward. The bar's further away from the hips, closer to the knees. That means now the hips got to work harder. So that's kind of the take-home message on that. Does that make sense?
Right here.
Doc Wilson, shout-outs from you. Oh, this is nice. R. Drizzle says, Doc Wilson, shout-outs from UT. Best professor / teacher / mentor in the game. I really appreciate it, Ross. And Just Joey C says, completely honest, just want to give a quick shout-out. Best YouTube content around. Keep it up. I know the work that goes into it much. Justin, Just Joey C, I really appreciate that, man. I appreciate all you guys. That means a lot to me. And by the way, if you guys are on Facebook Live, if you could do us actually do the community a favor, we're a community. This is Muscle Ph.D. is not me. Muscle Ph.D. is everyone watching this. It's myself, it's Andy, it's Paul, it's you, it's Russ, it's Reynolds right there, it's Matt Holtz, it's all you guys on here. We're all collectively this Muscle Ph.D. community. So hit share and spread the love right now if you can. Now we're going to talk about stance width. Does stance width impact quads and glutes? Well, what studies seem to show is basically if I do a wider stance, then essentially what will happen, I have more forward lean. Same thing, more forward lean, bars further away from the hips, greater hip activation, right? And basically, and that's the point. If I have a closer stance, I can stay more upright, which is going to put the bar further away from the knees, greater quad activation. So that's the main lesson on that. I think that comes out, I don't know, tomorrow?
No, it came out yesterday.
Oh, came out yesterday, okay.
Here's today.
Next thing is like, where do you point the toes? And this is a little controversial, but there's studies on this. But there's one study basically they showed, basically look, and if you look at the middle quads, right? The middle quads here, okay? If you turn your toes out, okay, basically what it ends up doing is it puts tension on the middle quads right away. And so there's some studies that if you turn your toes out, you actually can activate the mid quads just because you're placing tension on them by turning the toes outward. Similarly, if you're trying to hit the outer quads, if you're turning your toes in, you're placing tension automatically on the outer quads just by the fibers and where they're inserting on the outside. By turning your toes in, you automatically put tension on the muscle and you activate the muscle more. So turn your toes in, or turn your toes out, you're going to put more tension, for example, immediately on the inner quads. That'll build up that teardrop. You turn your toes in, now you're putting more tension on the outer quads, and so that should essentially build the outer quads more. And then basically the last thing is basically we're talking about, can the middle quads be targeted with leg extensions? One of the things, and again, I was talking to Will Wallace about this the other day at William Wallace. He has actually a really cool Instagram, actually.
Check out Will.A. Wallace.
Yeah, Will.A.Wallace. And if you're not sure if any of these, you go to my Instagram, and you'll see these guys on my Instagram a lot. I'll put them on my story. But basically, William, we were having a conversation. If you think about the rectus femoris, right? The rectus femoris crosses the hip joint, unlike the other quads. That means it works at the knee, but it works at the hip as well. Now, when I'm coming up on a squat, what am I doing? I'm extending the hip, okay? So if I stand up, the hips are being extended, okay? As opposed, when I'm flexing, I'm bringing my knee closer to my chest. When I'm extending, I'm bringing my knee further away from my chest, right? But the hip's got to flex. So if the hip is flexing, bringing the knee closer to chest, when I'm extending it, I'm bringing the leg further away from my chest. So if I'm standing up and I'm extending my hip, would it be beneficial for my hip to flex? No, right? But the problem is the rectus femoris is a hip flexor, okay? So that middle quad, that diamond, it's a hip flexor. Remember I said if I do like hanging leg raises, I'll activate that rectus femoris. But you don't want it highly necessarily active on a squat on the way up because you don't want a lot of that hip flexion when you're trying to extend the hip. So when you do leg extensions, okay, now you're not worried about hip extension. So you're doing leg extension, you're not worried about hip extension. So that basically the rectus femoris actually gets more activated on a leg extension than like a squat. So that's the take-home message.
Really quick, this one also kind of correlates to that. Are leg extensions bad for patella?
I mean, it's basically anytime you're looking at like injuries and things of that nature, it all depends on the individual, right? So, like for example, like Ryan Lowry has some patella pain right now. It's probably not necessarily the best idea for him to be doing his leg extensions are exacerbated when he's doing leg extensions. He should stay away from it. I don't have that problem, and you know, as Paul will tell you, every single time I go to the gym, I start off with like leg extensions, like flexing the quads, getting some Instagram feeds on them. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, it's all dependent on you. Okay.
Awesome questions.
So now, guys, we're gonna get into questions and answers. And like I said, if you're on Facebook, share this. If you're on Instagram, what's up? Phil Graham's on. Phil Graham, guys. If you are basically Phil Graham 01 is freaking awesome. I'm glad he's on Instagram. If you're not following Phil Graham 01, follow him right now. He's actually to me the world's expert on type 1 diabetes and bodybuilding. No one's talking about it. He's got a book out on it. Definitely follow him. And I actually I got to get those pictures from Johnny, Phil, he took. Phil and I got a picture of us like at Body Power.
Let's get right into it.
Let's roll. My lower VL is lagging. That's the vastilateral outer sweep. How do I bring it up? That's a really good question. So again, one of the things that you can do is like on leg extensions, you can point your toes in. Also, again, like front squats are going to be really good for the VL. Hack squats, like legs close in, hack squats. So I'd say front squats, hack squats, high bar squats. But also trying to activate the muscle. We just did a podcast with Ben Pokolsky today, and I talked to.
Is it coming out in 2 weeks?
It comes out in 2 weeks, and Ben's a really good friend of mine. Been for years actually, and one of the things Ben taught me is when on quads, I was like, I want to bring out the outer sweep, right? When you're doing your squats, you kind of shove your quads outward, and it kind of activates that outer sweep. So basically when you're doing like leg press or squats, shove your feet kind of outward and activate that muscle right away. You're going to see your VL like explode. Okay. Zero Fights says, best way to relieve tightness in the glutes and hamstrings. And it can happen from a lot of different reasons, right? But one thing is you could stretch the glutes and hamstrings. You know what I mean? That's definitely a way that you can relieve the tightness in them. So I just focus on like a good active stretching program for them. Michelle Padovano says, quads development. What about including 2 variations in each mesocycle, e.g. back squat and front squat, but on separate sessions? Thank you, Doc. Michelle, no, thank you for being a part of the community and for asking that question. Absolutely. Here's the biggest thing is that if there's a biological law of accommodation, it means that if I do the same thing over and over and over again, what will end out happening is that I will accommodate or adapt to that, okay? So if all you do is the same variation of squat all the time, you're going to adapt to it, period. So you really need to do variations of squat, front squat, back squat, wide squat, close stance squat, banded squats, chain squats, right? All of those things. I guarantee you, if you go out and you do the same damn stance every single time on squat, you're going to hit a plateau. Switch it up. Switch it up.
Can I?
Yeah.
Have a question that builds right off of that one.
Okay.
Right here. So.
Sandro Lemos?
Yes.
Okay, what's up, Sandro?
You have to read it.
Yeah, I'll read.
Okay.
So,
Hey, you want to read it or me?
Yeah, you can read.
Okay. Hey, Doc. What's up, Sandro? What do you think of variations of the exercises during the training session for quads? Something like used in the article. Changes exercise. Oh, the one we talked about? Yeah, I think that you should have multiple angles and multiple exercise during a squat session. So like one thing, for example, that you might do, for example, is you do front squats and you're failing on the front squats, rack the bar, pick it up on and do high bar squats. When you fail on high bar squats, rack the bar, reposition on a low bar, and go to failure on that. It's horrible. It's it sounds miserable. It sounds horrible. I think I'm going to do that tomorrow.
Great idea.
I like it. But Sandra, yeah, absolutely. You want to definitely do that, my friend. Love it. Kaiser Time says, what is your opinion in terms of sugar intake, daily max, etc.? I think the biggest thing, my thing is that as opposed to like limitation on sugar intake, I'd focus on high quality foods, right? There's a movement right now that sugar doesn't mean anything, blah, 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 blah. Guys, listen. Science is great, okay? But sometimes sometimes you just use common sense. Do you know what I'm saying? Look, I'm all about studies, right? I'm all about studies. I've done a couple hundred of them, right? I published over 200 papers, got Young Investigator of the Year award in NSCA. I'm very accomplished as a scientist. If as a scientist, if you were accomplishments, I'd be on the Mr. Olympia stage. I wish that happened, but unfortunately, they don't have Mr. Olympias for scientists, okay? I'm just going to use common sense, all right? I'm going to take two individuals. I'm going to tell one individual, hey, guess what? Have as much sugar as you want. It doesn't matter, right? Just Doesn't matter as long as you fit your macros, have as much sugar as you want, drink sugar, drink Tang, have Pop-Tarts. Then I'm going to tell individual B, hey, have broccoli, you know what I mean? Have low glycemic carbohydrates. Make sure your fiber intake's high, you know what I mean? Have whole wheat. If you're going to have higher herbs, have whole wheat, right? Let's use common sense. Which one's going to be healthier? Which one's going to have more longevity? It doesn't take a genius. It doesn't take an Einstein to figure that out, okay? So my thing is like this. What you need to do is focus on high-quality food. As opposed to, I usually don't say, like, eliminate stuff. Focus on high-quality food.
Do you think a lot of these individuals, as far as the studies for sugar, negate the longevity aspect and think of the here and now?
They absolutely negate the longevity effect. I think the biggest thing, like, think about this for a second. There's lots of studies that show, like, if I were to compare a high-fiber carb to sugar, the changes that happen in my gut microbiome would be drastic. Drastic. And that's the long game, right? So basically, you think about, like, your good bacteria, bacterial diversity, is going to go down if I compare having a high-sugar diet to a high-fiber, nutrient-dense diet. Period. There's tons of studies on that. But the other thing is scientists, or people, come out, and they literally come out and say, oh, listen to this, like, if you control for carbohydrate and protein intake and total calories, there's no difference, again, like Paul said, in the short term. And you know what scientists need to do in studies? Control for reality. Okay? Here's a reality check, guys. If I tell someone to eat a bunch of sugar or someone to eat like healthy food, it's going to be easier. Basically, you're not going to be as hungry. You're going to be more full. You'll be more satiated. You're not going to have drops in blood sugar as frequently. What's easier to sustain, right? Also, it's a lot easier to, if I'm going to mess up on it, whoever overate broccoli, right? Who messed up eating healthy food? But if there's like a ding dong and a Twinkie sitting right next to me, within 5 minutes I could screw up my diet for the day. See what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Higher calorie density food. And then the other thing, like I saw a presentation like, oh, sugar's not bad if you control calories, but sugar makes you want to eat more high calorie foods. Sugar makes you want to overeat. Okay? That's real world. Okay? So my point is, to your question, focus on high quality foods, nutrient dense foods, foods that decrease inflammation, period. All right, Eric Olson says, Doc, when dieting down and removing carbs to lower calories, how essential is it to have a high carb day to replenish leptin levels? How often should we do this? So basically, I think you're talking about carb cycling. I think like calorie cycling, carbohydrate cycling is likely beneficial for maintaining metabolism, maintaining your ability to utilize dual fuels. One of the things I think you want to think about, like, let's say think of Paul and Andy, okay? These guys are awesome. So I'm going to compare these guys to a car, and the car is going to be a Tesla, okay?
Nice. I'll take a Tesla.
Okay, yeah. All right, now Paul says that it's all good, right? So what's unique about a Tesla, besides the fact that it could drive itself, is the fact that it can use dual fuel. It can use gasoline, it can also use electric, okay? So when you actually expose yourself to different dietary challenges, now your body's flexible. And I think that is a benefit to carbohydrate cycling. So yeah, I do think it's a good idea. Good question, Eric. Evolved Men says, if negatives build more muscle, why aren't we all doing negatives? Well, Evolved Man, we technically are. Because think about this for a second. Every time I do a rep on the way up, I'm doing a negative on the way down. Now, I want to point something out here. It's very important, okay? We've known that negatives can be more beneficial for hypertrophy than positives I think I knew that when I was 12, right? I remember I was in the gym, and I remember my gym teacher telling me that. So it's pretty much common knowledge, right? There's nothing new, nothing robust. We all know that. But I need to emphasize something here. Negatives, which is eccentric training, only builds more muscle when there's a greater load on the eccentric. Okay? If I were actually to compare a concentric lift, and I did 10 reps concentrically, and I took that and I compared that, or 10 reps concentrically on this arm, and then 10 centimeters eccentrically on this arm, and the weight was the same, you'd actually have a greater growth stimulus on the arm that did concentric training. And the reason why is because the load relatively is higher concentrically than eccentrically, is I can lift more weight on the way down than the way up. So the only way for the eccentric lift to have greater growth than the concentric is if you add more load. So say Andy and I go to the gym, okay? I'm doing a bicep curl on the way up. What's Andy got to do? He's got to pull my arm down, and when he does that, now I'm taking advantage of that. Does that make sense, guys? Okay, so
right here, we have a few more.
Actually, it's Katie. Is it Katie? What? Okay, so we got a few more here. Okay, so I'm gonna. Katie. Okay. By the way, basically, Katie Lay List is real. She's super positive. What's up, Katie? Good to see you. I just saw Katie the other day. Katie is a super positive person. You know, in life, I think it's a good idea to hang around positive people who are happy. And Katie's one of them. She's got a really good Instagram, Katie Lay List. So, anyway, what's up, Katie? Good to see you. Do you think there is benefit, besides increased volume, to doing the same exercise on two or more pieces of equipment in the same lift session, i.e. dumbbell bicep curls and cable curls and barbell curls? You know, Katie, I absolutely think there's definitely a benefit to that. So there's a guy, a scientist by the name of Dr. English, and he did a lot of studies in the 90s and some in the 80s, and his studies were on compartmentalization. Basically, he demonstrated, if you look at the biceps, anatomically we see two muscles, but functionally and from a neuromuscular standpoint, there's several functional neuromuscular compartments, okay? And basically, depending on leverage, depending on the angle that I move, I will activate those different functional neuromuscular compartments based on different angles. So if I do a standing barbell curl versus an incline dumbbell curl versus a preacher curl, I'm going to activate those functional neuromuscular compartments different. In that case, that's why I think it's good to activate different angles. Now, Ben Bukolsky kind of takes the Dr. English component, and he has a different twist, a different sort of perspective on it, and I think it's a really good perspective. Basically, what he does is he thinks you should work the muscle in a fully shortened position, a middle position, and a fully lengthened position, right? So a good example of that would be like, if I'm going to do like a more middle position, it would be standing barbell curls. In a more of a fully lengthened position, I'm going to do incline dumbbell curls, and then more of a shortened position, I'm going to do more of like a preacher type curl, right? So I do think there's a lot of benefit to that based on Dr. English's theory. I would highly recommend that, right? So one more question or two?
Yep, I have it.
So what are we, two more or one?
Right here.
All right, Ryan Michael Sarsaw. That's a cool name. Ryan Michael Sarsaw says, what's more important, frequency or intensity? You know, you guys know, you know my answer is going to be right?
Yep.
Both.
Yep.
They're both important, right? So the thing is, with higher frequency, your intensity can't be high every single day, right? So I don't think they're either or. So basically, if I'm training a body part Monday, Wednesday, Friday, one of those days is going to be high intensity. One's going to be moderate, one's going to be low. So both.
Okay, super important. There's been like 6 people who asked specifically this again.
Okay. Oh, and are we doing intermittent fast next week? I think we are, right?
Yep.
Okay, you know what? This is great, guys. So, Axer Gaffor says, I'm going to be fasting for a month because Ramadan's coming up, right? So, no food and water in the daylight. Oh, Andy's like, you're going to fast for a month? That's a long fast, man. But basically, you're no food or water in daylight hours. That's about 18 hours in England. That's tough. I was just in England, actually. I was just in England and Birmingham for Body Power. That's where I saw Phil Gramm. Could you advise me on how to lose fat without muscle? Many thanks.
The biggest thing, all the other ones correlated to atrophy and BCA.
Yeah. You know what? So you're going to be basically have 6 hours that you can eat and train. There's a lot of, first off, number one thing is don't let cortisol get a hold of you, okay? Because I know there's a lot. I was with Ben this morning, and basically, like, one of the things, like, you ever go, I was in a hotel room, actually, in England. Normally, you go to a hotel room, you go to the balcony, you look down, right? And there's a window kind of stopping you, or bars stopping you from falling off. I don't know if it's an England thing or what. It's the only hotel I've ever stayed at in England. But basically, you can go to the ledge and there's no bars or nothing that could stop, no like ledge. So like I looked down, I could tell. I was like, man, I got a little high on that, right? A little rush. But bodybuilders, when they think fasting, it's like going on the edge of a building, Empire State Building, looking down. It stresses them out because you're like, oh my God, I'm fasting. Core goes up. I'm going to lose muscle. It's horrible, right? Have you ever thought that before? You know what I mean?
After fasting, I'm like, should I take some BCAAs?
Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm worried. You're scared. You're scared. It's like a roller coaster. Is this going to drop? But anyway, it's okay. Studies have shown in Ramadan that basically, if you're doing this for a month and you have an eating period of 6 to 8 hours, you're going to be fine. Okay. Couple tips that I would have for you: train either right before you eat or in that feeding period itself, okay? You don't want to train in the morning and not eat for like 10 hours. That's no go, okay? You don't want to do that. Even though some people go, oh, window of opportunity is not important, that's BS, it is. So you want to make sure you eat around the time that you're training, okay? Number 2, hydration becomes very, very important. I got to emphasize a lot. There are studies that show basically that when you're dehydrated, the muscle gets smaller. Now, cell swelling is very, very important, especially for training in hypertrophy and protein synthesis. So you're going to want to make sure that you actually are having more sodium intake during that eating period, okay? Because you need to drink a lot of water, more than you normally do, during that feeding period, so you're hydrated throughout the fasting period. So that's my 2 pieces of advice that I would give you, okay?